It was late December 1944. The world was frozen, literally and metaphorically. Snow fell in thick, silent sheets, muffling the countryside west of the Rhine. The fog hung low over the ruined farmland, so dense it swallowed men and machines whole. You couldn't see your own boots, let alone the enemy. Every breath scraped with icy dread. Every heartbeat pounded out the seconds between survival and silence. Inside a battered Sherman tank, huddled beneath a patchwork net of torn canvas and frost, Private First Class Daniel Reed adjusted the fogged glass of his periscope. He pressed a gloved palm against the cold metal, struggling to make out movement in the gray expanse beyond. His world was the inside of this steel box, a place where hope and fear lived together in the dark. Outside, the war was changing. The German advance had slowed, but not stopped. Reports whispered of an ace enemy commander, Egon Stahl, prowling the sector with his personal Panther. Stahl's reputation was infamous. He was a hunter whose name made even seasoned Americans check their safeties twice. For weeks, rumors had spread through the ranks about the ghost in the fog, a German tank ace who could strike from nowhere and vanish before the counterattack came. Reed's unit, the 79th Armored, had been assigned to a ridge that overlooked a narrow crossroads. Their orders were clear: observe, hold the line, don't fire unless command confirmed. But command was just a crackle on the radio, and the fog was swallowing their world. Reed wasn't the kind of soldier legends were written about. He was thin, quiet, the product of a farming town where every sunrise was measured in degrees, and every winter tested the limits of grit. His dad ran the fix-it shop out by the highway, welding broken tractor frames and tuning engines few others dared touch. His mother taught geometry at the local school. It was from her that Reed learned to see the world in angles, to calculate lines of sight in his head when others just guessed. He carried that skill to France, and now Germany. Where other gunners trusted their instincts, Reed trusted his tape measure, his notebook, and quiet patience. He counted the clicks of turret rotation. He kept logbooks for every engagement, sketches for every enemy tank variation he encountered. When the crew teased him, "Hey, Professor, you diagramming your nightmares again?" he just nodded and kept drawing. But war, Reed had learned, wasn't made for patience. The hell of the hedgerows had taught him that the enemy could appear from nowhere, and that sometimes waiting on orders meant waiting for disaster. He'd lost friends to the random roll of fate. A shell here, a mine there, just enough to remind him that caution was also a kind of risk. He didn't think of himself as brave, just careful. Sometimes that made all the difference. This morning, the difference might mean everything. The fog pressed closer, muting distant sounds to cryptic thumps and metallic echoes. Reed's loader, Simmons, gnawed a frozen ration bar and cursed the cold beneath his breath. Their driver, Halloran, fiddled with the starter while the tank commander, Sergeant Ellis, watched the horizon for any shred of movement. The crew was tense but focused. Each man trusted Reed's eyes to spot trouble before it came. Through his periscope, Reed tracked faint shadows. Could be trees, could be enemy armor. He made a mental note of the field's layout, whispered coordinates to himself, and felt his pulse steady. "Sometimes you see things no one else does," his mother used to say. Today, he hoped it was true. Official orders were simple: observe, report, do not engage unless contact confirmed by HQ. But the radio was unreliable. Static bursts masked as speech, the occasional barked command garbled beyond recognition. In the fog, certainty was a luxury. Reed pressed the headset tighter, waiting for word. None came. His mind wandered to the last time he'd hesitated. A skirmish in the French marsh, when enemy armor had slipped past in the haze, and he hadn't fired for fear of striking friendly units. The guilt lingered. Every quiet moment in the tank was a reminder. He'd promised himself next time he'd trust his calculations, his notes, his gut, even if protocol said to wait. The stakes were higher now. Intelligence reports warned of a major German armor thrust. Supply columns were exposed. Allied infantry cut off in sectors the tanks couldn't reach. The enemy ace, Stahl, was out there, somewhere in the white void, hunting for a gap in the line. If he found it, The consequences would ripple up and down the front. Reed's observation was relentless. He marked faint treads in the snow, calculated road positions, sketched the shadows he saw through the blur of his lenses. Every 2 minutes he recalibrated, shifting for lens fog, snow glare, and the weight of both expectation and dread. His logbook, clipped to the side of the periscope, was filling up fast. In clipped exchanges, Simmons asked, "You see them?" Reed replied, "Too far, not yet." "But they're close," Ellis muttered. "Command says wait. We wait." But time, Reed knew, doesn't always wait for command. He felt it, like an itch under the skin, a tension coiling in his chest. Somewhere out there, Stahl was making his move. The fog was both shield and snare. Guns silent, engines murmuring in their choked idle. He thought about his father in the fix-it shop, his mother teaching kids to measure circles in dirt. He felt the weight of his own promises, to spare what lives he could, to trust the knowledge he'd earned in the slant light of war. The world seemed to stop breathing. Reed's senses were sharpened to razor edge. Every creak of the Sherman's cold hull, every distant engine thrum, every heartbeat echoing through the gunner's seat. The fog grew thicker still, shrinking the world to a ghostly tunnel outside his vision blocks. It was as if the war beyond had faded away, leaving only him, his crew, and the fate of that crossroads. And then, a shape. At first just a ripple in the haze, then a looming silhouette, the squared-off, menacing hull of a Panther tank moving through the mist like a prowling beast. Behind it, the weary lines of more German armor, headlights fuzzed by white vapor. Reed's blood chilled. He knew the Panzer's silhouette instantly. This was no routine patrol. This was Egon Stahl's legendary spearhead, the Hunter and his wolves. Reed counted. 1 Panther, 2 more, a half-track slinking behind, a pair of Panzer infantry carriers, all moving with caution and deadly intent. He logged their order, distance, movement rate, flipping through his book in frantic calculation. Somewhere in that column, Stahl watched with the eyes of a predator, searching for the weakness that would topple the ridge. Radio static hissed in Reed's ears. "Eagle 2, hold fire, hold fire!" "Observation only," came the clipped order, scrambled and barely legible through the interference. But Reed could see, clearer than ever, what command could not. Stahl's column was forming up for an attack run straight through the crossroads. If they broke through, the road to the trapped Allies would be lost. The urgency pressed in like cold fingers. Sergeant Ellis, watching with binoculars, looked at Reed. "You see this?" "Yeah," Reed replied, voice low. "They're lining up for a push." Ellis hesitated. "No green light." "We wait." But the seconds slipped by, and Reed felt each one tighten the noose, not just around his own crew, but around every soldier fighting and freezing past the ridgeline. The German column advanced, tanks spreading into a staggered formation. Reed saw Stahl's trademark, weaving the lead Panther through cover, drawing attention, masking the other tanks' lines with thick clouds of dismounted infantry behind. It was textbook, except it would be unreadable in this fog if not for a trained, patient eye. Reed's mind spun through options. Wait for orders, shift position, gamble with the enemy's perfect vision. If he did nothing, the Allied line was at risk. If he fired without sanction, if his shot missed, a court-martial or worse. He closed his eyes. Calculated. How far would the sound echo in fog? Would the muzzle flash be spotted? Would the Germans think they'd stumbled into a full ambush, or catch him firing and render his tank a smoking ruin in seconds? Through the gun sight, shapes grew larger. German armor crawled closer. Stahl's Panther less than 300 yards away, dangerously close for the Sherman, frighteningly perfect for its high-velocity shell if the angle was right. He remembered every lesson from his father, every geometry sketch from his mother's classes. Angles, timing, sequences. He flipped through his log. A notation. If a column is targeted in the wrong order, the others may scatter and counterattack. But if the right shot collapses the sequence, if you strike the linchpin first, the rest can be trapped, even destroyed. He did the math in silence. Stahl was only moments from breaking the crossroad. The static on the radio was replaced by the pulsing silence of fate. Reed exhaled. The fog parted just enough, only for an instant. He saw the unique paint marks on the Panther's thick front plate, a scar from some other battle. He saw the angle of the turret, the rhythm of the tanks behind it. This was the chance. The only chance. He snapped, almost whispering, "Loader! AP!" Simmons slammed a shell into the breach, heart racing as he felt Reed tensing for something forbidden. "Do it," Ellis murmured, eyes tight, voice barely a vibration. Reed's hands were steady. He aligned the shot. He wouldn't take the front Panther, wouldn't waste the shell on the thick armor. No, he targeted the second tank, slightly angled, flanking the Panther to the right. Its destruction would block the rest, creating chaos in the column. He squeezed the trigger. The shell howled through the haze. A booming roar split the world. In a flash of steel and shattering glass, the Panzer IV erupted in smoke and fire, its wreck lit up even through the blinding mist. A split-second silence hung. Then chaos. The Germans reeled. Infantry scattered. Tanks halted in sudden confusion. Reed's mind hummed. Next shot quickly. The loader rammed another round. Reed shifted 3 feet, recalibrated, and fired again, hitting a trailing half-track. German shouts punctured the air. The Panther gunned reverse, only to find blocked passage from burning vehicles, their precious staggered formation collapsing into a metallic bottleneck. Through the periscope, Reed saw enemy silhouettes frantically shifting, crews bailing out into the fog. The lead Panther pivoted, gun swinging to locate the source of this invisible ambush. Reed watched, waited. He knew the weak point would show for a single heartbeat as the turret turned. He fired one more, this time his last-second shot. The shells smashed against the flank, sparking an explosion within. For a moment the Panther held. Then a blast ripped its top open, fire licking through the fog like ghostly fingers. To the Germans, it seemed the work of an entire American battery, a ghostly, unseen force. Some fired wildly into the trees, others tried to turn and run. Radio calls in German carried panicked orders, their legendary ace now a flickering wreck in shattered armor. Reed kept moving, shifting the Sherman's position after every shot, never letting a muzzle flash stay in the same place twice. In the smoke and confusion, he became a phantom, an echo, a threat they could not find. Simmons' arms burned from loading shell after shell. Halloran wrestled the starter, shifting their hull behind a crumbling wall for cover. Minutes stretched into years. The enemy column was crippled, 4 vehicles destroyed, others abandoned. Reed's notebook, smudged with sweat and gun oil, lay open at his side as he calculated the next angle, the next risk. Each decision, the product not of rage, but of practiced logic and experience, his quiet mind racing 3 steps ahead. The fog closed again, swallowing the burning hulks, muffling the shouts and the gunfire. Reed's heart hammered. His mind replayed each decision. Did he do enough? Did he doom his own crew? Was this intuition or disaster? But there for an instant was victory. One last-second shot. One plan executed on the razor's edge between discipline and doom. The legend was already being born in the confusion, even if Reed could not see it. For now, all he knew was that the fog had become his ally and his secret. The world was quiet now, save for the hiss of burning metal and the soft crunch of snow under boot. Reed's Sherman sat behind a screen of battered stone and frost, the fog beginning to thin as daylight pressed through ruined clouds. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with the humbled awe of survival. Around him the landscape was transformed, a graveyard of twisted steel, scorched snow, and the ghosts of a column once untouchable. The crew was silent, exhaustion written in every line. Simmons finally spoke, voice hoarse. "Did we really do that?" Halloran just shook his head, eyes glassy. Ellis, the sergeant, took the longest to speak. "You saved the crossroad. You saved us. That shot, maybe it saved more than you'll ever know." Word traveled fast. Scouting parties arrived, wide-eyed at the devastation. The legend of Reed's last-second shot leaked through the ranks. The tale of a quiet Kansas kid who broke protocol and brought down a German ace in a single, unrepeatable moment. They asked who coordinated the ambush. Ellis replied simply, "It was him. Just him." Reed expected consequences, disciplinary review, official reprimand. Instead, higher command read his notes, traced the firing sequence, and after long silences, nodded with respect. They didn't call him a hero. They didn't hand out medals. But suddenly every tank crew wanted to hear about the shot in the fog, about tactics, about trusting the brain you bring to battle. For Reed, the battle didn't end with the burned-out tanks or the fading acrid smoke. It lingered in the weight of small choices, of drawing lines that others would study. He didn't chase glory, didn't pose for photographs. When finally reassigned, he trained new gunners, teaching geometry and nerves, how to see more than the battlefield, how to feel the subtle moments that define survival. Egon Stahl, the feared ace, disappeared that day, not just from the ridge, but from legend. His defeat echoed as a warning. Sometimes the solution isn't brute force, but a single moment of bold intuition, executed at the edge of risk. Years later, Reed would return home. He built engines, marked lines in the dust for neighborhood kids. He never told war stories, but sometimes, when the fog rolled in with the winter wheat, he'd point out the spot where seeing through the mist meant more than following orders. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent, measured, practiced, balancing instinct against instruction. Sometimes it's a last-second shot that rewrites fate. What do you think matters more in battle? Orders or trusting your gut? If you believe sharp thinking saves more lives than blind obedience, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of unsung battlefield heroes, impossible decisions, and the small moments that change history.